Hi everyone, this is Selvi. Today's topic is what is entry and exit criteria of a sprint. So, before getting into the topic of entry and exit criteria of a sprint, let's try to understand some more details about entry and exit criteria. Entry and exit criteria is available for all the work items. So, I utilize this episode to explain the entry and exit criteria as well. And in further upcoming episodes, we will be seeing the entry and exit criteria of all the work items. Now, first let's try to understand what is entry criteria and exit criteria. Let's start with a very simple example. I want to travel from place A to place B. I am going to use train. So I reached the train station of place A. To board the train, I need to get the train ticket. So I got the train ticket, I boarded the train. So here, to start the travel and to board the train, we need a valid ticket. This is the entry criteria for the journey. So for the journey from place A to place B, valid train ticket is required as the entry criteria to start. Because without valid train ticket, I cannot board the train. So this is the entry criteria. So I am traveling now and train reached the place B. So I saw the name board. Okay, I reached the destination. I just got down from the train. For reaching the destination B, what is the exit criteria here? The exit criteria is the train should reach the place B. Even though train is going to have a long journey, but for me, for my journey, if train reaches the place B, then it's exit criteria for me to stop the journey and get on from the train. So entry criteria decides and approves to start an action. Exit criteria validates and approves to complete the action. So to start the journey and to board the train, train ticket is required. That is the entry criteria for my journey. To stop the journey, the train should reach the place B so that I can get on from the train and complete my journey. So this is a very simple example. This is almost for every action and every activity, entry and exit criteria is required, especially when we follow certain process. Why it is required? Because when I can say, okay, I'm ready to start this work, I need certain things, whether all those things are available or not, like how we have definition of ready checklist. Similarly, this entry criteria, we can set some kind of protocol and process so that certain things are available, like to board the train, train ticket is required. Similarly, to start my action, I need all these things. And similarly, when I can say I have completed or I am completing, when I can say when I am actually matching certain things. In software process, the best example I can tell now is related to the software testing activity. So we have seen the train example and the journey related example as a common scenario. Now let's try to understand the same thing from our software testing process. In software testing process, for the software testing to start, what is the entry criteria required? You should have a working software so that you can test on that, and test cases should be available. Test environment should be available. And test suite, that is, what are the test cases that we are going to pick up for the first level of testing, acceptance level of testing, all those level of test suites should be available. These all things are called as the entry criteria to start the software testing. And now I'm keep on doing the software testing, and when I can say that, okay, software testing is done and we have actually matching the exit criteria and we are ready to say that testing is done. When can we say that? When all the test cases have been executed and there are no severity 1 and 2 defects, and the test report is available. I'm just giving high level example. There are much more when it comes to software testing, and especially when we have a defined process set according to the product, but I'm giving a kind of example so that we all can correlate. Why we need to set the exit criteria of testing? If I'm not setting, what will happen? If I'm not having entry criteria for software testing, what will happen? Test cases are ready, test environment is also ready, and I know what is the test suite I'm going to execute also, I'm clear. But there is no working product. There is no stable product. That product is keep breaking and it cannot be even tested. How can I initiate the testing? Whether my entry criteria is matching in this case? No, it is not matching. Because at least I should have a minimum level of stability so that I can start the, if login itself is not working in a page, in a web page, how can I even continue testing the product? And there is always a blocker and there is no workaround. How can I continue? So it is impossible to continue the software testing. So a minimum level stability is required in the working product. Test cases are available and test environment is also available. Test suite is also available. So all these things are required. Then we can say, if these things are not available, then with what process, with what level of information we can say, no, we are not ready and the entry criteria is not matching. How can we say that? There should be some certain level of protocols that need to be available so that we can initiate any activity. In this condition, the activity is the software testing. Similarly, what is the exit criteria? Testing is keep on going. Software testing of the product is like keep on going and issues are keep flowing in, defects are found, so many things are happening. Somewhere we need to stop. On what basis we can stop? We are saying, okay, all the test cases are executed at least once and there are no severity 1 and 2 defects and we have created the test reports. Now it's good to stop the testing, because there are chances that we can still find defects, we can still find some kind of nice to have functionalities, but somewhere we need to say on what criteria I am saying the testing is done. That is called as the exit criteria. So we should be clearly understanding what is this entry criteria and exit criteria concept. Now let's come to the topic of sprint. Here it is slightly different. That's why I picked first as sprint for entry and exit criteria topic, so that it's very interesting to learn this concept. So whatever we have seen so far in entry and exit, with example, with software testing example, with train journey example, all the things we learned that there is some entry criteria to start the activity and exit criteria so that we can say that I am done. In sprint, what is the entry criteria? It is very simple. We already learned this in our previous episodes using sprint backlog, sprint planning meeting, what is sprint goal, all those things we have learned. I'm just going to just summarize all those things here. That is nothing but the entry criteria. What are those things? The first thing is you should have the sprint backlog. How sprint backlog will be created? For a sprint backlog, there are some more prerequisites. What are they? You should have the capacity details of the team. You should have the average velocity of the team, and you should know what are the work items that are matching definition of ready with high priority provided by the product owner. And all the items that are being pulled from the product backlog should align to the sprint goal, right? So for the sprint backlog, sprint goal should be there, because associated items of that sprint goal only will be pulled to the sprint backlog. From where? Product backlog. On what basis? On high priority and meeting complete definition of ready. And what are the other things? Average velocity and the capacity. So if all these details are there, then we are good to start the sprint. In addition, in the sprint planning, we will do one more thing. What is that? Assignment of work items to team members. Not on push basis, based on pull basis. What is meant by pull mechanism here? Team members, they themselves will be assigning, they themselves will be voluntarily saying that, okay, I will pick up this work item. It is not based on, okay, I assign this to this person, I assign work item 2 to this person, work item 3 to this person. No, it is based on team. They will be pulling the work items on their name. So if we are ready with all these things, then we are ready to start the sprint. Tasking of the work items is not mandatory. It is good if for real tracking and monitoring of the work items. As we have already discussed about the task, it is very good to follow that, but it is not mandatory. It is optional, because when the team gets matured into a level, without task itself, they will be able to have a detailed level of understanding how to monitor the work items at high level on the level of user stories. So in a nutshell, let's summarize what are the things that we have discussed. The sprint goal should be available, and the associated work items of the sprint goal should be available on the sprint backlog. And for creating the sprint backlog, we need capacity and the velocity details, and the high priority work items that matches with definition of ready checklist from the product backlog. So these many things are available to create the sprint backlog. And to start the sprint, team members should be assigning the work items on their name and create tasks inside it. If all these things are done, we are ready to start the sprint. So these all are the things that are required as the entry criteria for a sprint. So if all these things are available, we can execute the sprint. Now, what is the exit criteria? Let's say 10 work items are there in the sprint backlog. What is the exit criteria? It's very simple. There is no exit criteria for a sprint. Please don't get confused. That's why I picked up this topic specially after explaining what is entry and exit criteria in detail. Now let's get into the concept why there is no exit criteria for a sprint. What is a sprint? A sprint is a time-based event. Time-boxed event. What is time-based, time-boxed event? Whatever the work we complete it or not, sprint will be closed by 10 days if the length of the sprint is 2 weeks. If the length of the sprint is 3 weeks, then on 15th working day, we will be closing our sprint, regardless of whatever the status of the work items that are available in the sprint backlog. Selvi, this is slightly confusing. Can you give an example? Is the ask, right? I can understand that. Let's go with an example so that it will be very easy for you all to correlate on this topic. I visited a museum. Okay, it's an art museum. So for the museum to enter, we need to get a ticket. Let's say entry ticket. So I got that entry ticket. Without that entry ticket, they will not allow us to enter. When I say us, it's a kind of like by batch we will be entering into the museum. Okay, so as a group, we were waiting, and all of us got that valid entry ticket. So we all were waiting. We all came from the same set of tourist group. So we all were standing together. And now, once the time, actually, it was 10 in the morning. So they allowed us to enter into the museum. In the ticket itself, it was mentioned the validity of the ticket is for 2 hours. It's a very big museum. So actually, we all were not as group. We all actually got scattered, and we all were roaming at different places inside the museum. And I got completely lost in the ground floor, which means I spent good amount of time in the ground floor, and I spent very, very good amount in the ground floor, and then I went to the first floor. I was unable to complete all the places in the first floor because as I spent so much time on the ground floor. Then they used to inform us, okay, it's almost like 2 hours. You people need to be moving out now. So exactly at 12 at the noon, they said like, okay, you all can go out. So as a group who all had came in, we all had actually moved out. This concept is the same for sprint. We all came from one tourist group for visiting this art museum. That's the goal. So we all were associated on that goal of visiting this art museum. We got the ticket, that is for 2 hours is our sprint length, and we all had gone in as a backlog item. Now we had only 2 hours to completely watch the art museum. Few people, they wisely planned it and they visited all the places within 2 hours. Person like me, actually, I got struck at the ground floor, and I was spending too much time on the ground floor, so I have not visited on the first floor. But it doesn't really matter, as Selvi have not completed the entire visit. She can stay for extra time. No, there is no such criteria. The criteria is all about time, that is 2 hours. Even everyone have watched or not, it is just 2 hours. So that's the same thing happening in the sprint. All the sprint backlog items are getting executed in the sprint. Whether it is getting completed or not, whether it is in progress, whether it is not even started, it doesn't matter. At the end of the sprint, that is on 10th day or 15th day, based on the length of the sprint will be done. As we all have came out from the museum after 2 hours. Similarly, after 10 days or after 15 days, we will be done with our sprint, regardless of the work items, status of the work items. So where is the exit criteria here? There is no exit criteria because sprint is a time boxed event. There can be confusion like whether all the work items, whatever I have planned in the sprint backlog, when they all got over or completed, then only the sprint will end. No, that is not the exit criteria. So our answer should be, there is no exit criteria for a sprint, being sprint is a time boxed event. Regardless of the status of the work items in the sprint backlog, the sprint will be over. So there is no specific criteria. It is all about time. That is nothing but the length of the sprint. So this is what I want to talk about, the entry and exit criteria of the sprint. So entry criteria, we all know there are few items that we need to make it ready, few artifacts that should be ready and available so that we can start the sprint and the execution will start. But for the sprint exit, there is no criteria. Once the time is done with the length of the sprint, that is 10 days or 15 days, we are done. The sprint will be done and it is closed, regardless of the status of the work items. I think this episode definitely would have helped you all in understanding the entry and exit criteria concept, and especially for sprint. And as I mentioned initially, we will be talking about the entry and exit criteria for other work items as well in our upcoming episodes. Thanks everyone for listening. Happy learning and stay tuned.